we've been focused on the law of attraction this month, but last week we were more focused on emotions, and because emotions being such an important part of this equation, and the formula that we've been looking at each time, our emotional intensity being, the catalyst, the power, the juice behind our attractions. And, so I like this photo just to put things into perspective and why emotions are so important, because, I think a lot of the tools, again, that we talk about maybe fall more on the IQ side of things. When you look at like NLP, for example, and our intense focus on language, it can be a very IQ-based approach, or it can feel like you're thinking more than feeling at times. But I really want to stress the importance of EQ and emotions, because just like the picture says here, it's really the bottom of the iceberg. It's the more subconscious part of us. It's the undercurrent, if you will. And back to where we started this conversation today, really understanding how people feel and being able to touch people, connect with people on an emotional level, understand what people are going through, even though they may not be telling you, with their language, what's going on. We have more cues to understand, whether it's body language, tone of voice. It's really the predominant main thing here is change and transformation at an emotional level, and again, putting more emphasis on not just your request to the system, our A here in the equation, but really paying attention to our emotional intensity, our emotional reactions, our connections, how we're associating versus dissociating to things, and then the amount of time that we spend there. So another way to think about this, the difference between IQ and EQ, right? IQ being more the brain, the mind, the thinking, the analyzing, rationalization, logical, and the heart, the emotions, being that deeper side, the intuitive, the sensitive, the instincts, the gut feelings. And so I want to start off with a quick definition on EQ, because we hear so much about IQ. It's more emphasized and celebrated, or it has been, in our culture. We have a test for IQ, for instance. We don't really know about the tests for EQ. They exist, and it's still pretty new science and research behind this. But emotional intelligence, which was really coined by the author Daniel Goleman in his book Emotional Intelligence in the early 90s, I believe. The work had started before that, but he was the one that his book actually was a bestseller, and so he gets the credit for this coming into more focus and being more of a popular thing in recent years. But EQ being the ability to monitor one's emotions and other people's emotions, and then to discriminate between different emotions and label them appropriately. So we've talked a lot about this. We touch on it in various tools, the power of labels and the meanings that we create behind things. So one of our classic examples being the 8-foot step ladder versus the 800-foot cliff. Our example of the woman rock climbing and Colorado and she's about to make a release maneuver on a side of a cliff where she's going to be suspended in midair for a split second. And if we freeze frame her in that moment and we look at her adrenal and cortisol levels, they're through the roof, right? And then we take to contrast this, a totally different scenario. A man standing on the last rung of the ladder, of the step ladder, putting the final ornament on a Christmas tree, but he's deathly afraid of heights. And if we freeze frame him in that moment, same thing, same adrenal and cortisol levels through the roof, couldn't get any higher. And the difference between these two scenarios, why the woman's able to do this on an 800-foot cliff and the man's struggling to do it on an 8-foot step ladder, is the meaning behind it. So, what this emotional response is, the same neuropeptides, right? Same chemicals floating through the bloodstream, what that kind of physical bodily response is creating for the woman, she'd never been more alive. It's the adrenaline of life versus for the man, never been closer to death, deathly afraid of heights. It's the adrenaline of death. Right? So, same emotional response, same emotional situation, different meanings. Right? This is why we focus so much on the meanings that we create and the software that's running. Because it's what's doing the interpreting of the data points of life, of our emotional reactions to these data points. So, first being able to discriminate, knowing what emotion you're feeling, what emotion you're actually feeling, and then labeling them appropriately, labeling them consciously, and using that emotional information to guide your thinking and behavior and use it consciously. Again, talk about consciously directing our emotions last time. Can we control them versus are they out of our control? So hopefully we dispelled some of those myths for you. Yes, you absolutely can control, manage, direct your emotions as you please. And especially when you're conscious and you have conscious intention behind it, everything changes when you now understand your ability to do this and have tools in place to do so. So, the three models of emotional quotient that kind of started this whole body of work was the ability model. So I'm not going to pronounce the name, or I'm probably going to butcher him, but Peter Salovey and John Mayer, not that John Mayer, but focuses on the individual's ability to process emotional information and use it to navigate the social environment. So this is actually more in line with like an IQ test. You're testing the person's ability to process emotional information. The trait model being more based on self-report, right? So like a personality test. Encompasses behavioral dispositions and self-perceived abilities and is measured through self-support. And then the mixed model, which is really what Daniel Goleman wrote about. It's a combination of both ability and trait EQ. It defines EQ as an array of skills and characteristics that drive leadership performance. So now our definition, our add to this is it's also the ability and the will, right, the intention, to use and commit to drive one's own emotions, your emotional intensity meter, right, as well as inspire others. Inspire others' emotional intensity, and knowing that your emotions are not dictated by events or outside forces, but you dictate your own emotions. You drive then the outside forces and events to your will, right? So going back to changing the meaning of things changes your experience of the emotion. Now, I have a fun little story to start the rest of this content. Just to give you a more practical, application-based understanding of this, I had a client give me a great example this past week where they were at their job and their vendor, he found out he wasn't having a great day. Their vendor ended up screwing up an order, and so his reaction was anger, frustration, ended up kind of blowing up on this person, right? The rep at the vendor ended up feeling the wrath of his emotional reaction to this, and it was just like, yeah, I understand, being able to change my emotions, but sometimes it's just I find myself in these situations where it's not until after the fact where I'm maybe driving home from driving on my way to back to home, and I'm thinking about the day, and I'm why did I react like that? And man, I wish I wasn't so angry, and I wish I didn't blow up on that person. They probably didn't really deserve it. But that's just one example of how this happens. I don't get it until after the fact and where I'm reflecting. So I think this is a pretty common challenge with these things, because these type of emotional reactions, they're based on, again, software. They're based on habits. They're based on strategies, patterns that have run for a long, long time. And so most people just, it's an automatic response, right? It just kind of happens. It's what it's what you're used to. You don't even really think about it. Just kind of like you've driven a car enough times, you don't really think about, how you're driving, where you're going on your way to work. It's just kind of, you're on autopilot, right? Yeah. We're very efficient at this. Our brains are very efficient. There's actually a scientific reason as to why this happens, because to think actually requires a lot of energy. To actually think about what you're doing and pay attention and focus, and it does actually require energy. So our brains will find ways to do things where you don't have to think about it to conserve energy. So just a fun little tidbit there for you. There is evolutionary reasons as to why these things happen. But so what are you to do? How do we, if we're not conscious of this when it's happening, how do you be conscious? Because that's really the name of the game here. If you're running life on autopilot, if you're unconscious, then how can you change those things in the moment? So this is why we preach so much. Probably say it every time. Consciousness, consciousness, consciousness. It's not about judgment, about getting angry or getting sad or depressed, there's no judgment on the emotion. You become conscious of the emotion that runs and say, why did I react that way? Or why am I reacting that way right now? Why am I in this emotional state? What just happened? What triggered me? Oh, it's based on that piece of old software. Oh yeah, I remember in my conversation with Brian, that was based on a thing that was installed years ago, part of family of origin software. And so it takes being conscious in the moment. And so if you were to do nothing, if you were to just throw all of your tools, out the window and just do nothing but pay attention, just pay attention and listen to your reactions, your responses, your thoughts, your emotions throughout the day, you're going to have some pretty interesting insights, realizations, and hopefully transformations, because you're going to say, that's interesting. I can see why I reacted that way. Oh, that's a piece of old software. Oh, wait, I do have a tool for that. And so I mentioned this last time, and this is the tool that I gave to the client. How do you be conscious when you're unconscious? Well, again, this is going to be a shocker when I say this, guys. I know it. Are you journaling on a daily or near daily basis? Are you capturing your thoughts? Are you looking at them? And how often? Do you just have 1 hour of consciousness a day and then you're back to your old habits and, old patterns and reacting and then reflecting on the day and then you're back to unconscious? Or do you build consciousness into every moment? So, one, to journal, but use this as a tool, the timeline tool, to trigger or remind you to be aware and conscious throughout the day. You're going to, and this fits with the formula, if you remember, I touched on this last time. You're going to graph and plot throughout the day where you sit on, one, your emotional intensity meter. As you can see here, we've got a 10, and down here is -10, because you'll see above the line is the positive request, below the line is a negative request. But even if you're not doing this to track a manifestation or track a specific ask, you can just do this as a self-reporting, journaling kind of exercise. You're going to set an alarm, on your phone, and start with every hour. And maybe you move to every 30 minutes. But every hour is a pretty good time frame, interval. And every hour, the alarm's going to go off. You're going to check in. What's my emotional state right here? What's my emotional intensity? And you're going to plot it. So, maybe you wake up feeling good. You're at a, +4. You spend an hour there. So you're going to plot that. Great. You get to work. You open up your computer. Vendor screws up your order. Oh my God, this is terrible. What the heck happened? How many hours do you spend there? So this is why it follows the formula. Is it 6 hours at a -8? Then you graph that, you're going to plot it in. You get home, you spend some time with your family, you're feeling great. Couple hours. Awesome. So you're going to plot throughout the day, and then you're going to look at, what happened here? What was my trigger here? And as you start to build conscious competence with this, as you start to be even more aware throughout the day, these old songs on the radio, these triggers for old software, you catch them right in the tracks. So now old software doesn't run for 6 hours. Maybe it only runs for an hour, or a minute, or a second, or a millisecond. Because you're ever increasing consciousness, you're able to catch it in its tracks so that, when the vendor screws up the order and you're like, oh wait, I can feel old software starting to react here. Now you can play a different song. Now you can create a different meaning, which is the other piece to this. So, come on, pen. Framing and reframing. When you look at a data point, and you create the meaning behind it. Remember, you're always choosing that. You're always creating meanings. And old software is going to create its meanings. New software is going to create a different set of meanings. So now that when Phoenix screws up your order, it's not, this is terrible, the boss is going to fire me, or I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to let my team down, or whatever other old story you might run around a data point like that. Now you can say, either you just take it to a, 0, less emotional intensity. This is unfortunate. Well, got to deal with this now. It's going to be kind of pain in the ass, but I'll get it done. I'll get this. Wasn't what I was expecting today, but get it done, and I'm going to have a great rest of the day after this. Or it's, oh my God, this is amazing. The boss is this is my chance to be a hero. The boss is going to love me, and my team is going to celebrate once they know that I saved the day. Right? So going back to the formula example, that's all different meanings around a data point. So when you're framing and reframing situations, right? Quantum glass, half full or half empty. Old software is going to tend to go right to the half empty. This is terrible. I can't believe this. Versus, can you find a half full reframe and emotionalize that? So, again, I'm going to state it one more time that paying attention to your emotional just state throughout the day and being able to discriminate what emotion am I feeling, label it appropriately, just be conscious of what your emotions are telling you. Are you having an old software moment? Is this an opportunity for new software, a new song on the radio? Just be conscious. It's using your journal, using a tool like the timeline so that you arrive at this place where it's not just efforting through and it's kind of a paradox when I say unconsciously competent, right? You become unconsciously competent at being conscious. So my one ask for you, just pay attention, listen, use your journal, track your emotional, sways back and forth, and, see how it's connected to old versus new software. And you have a whole host of tools in order to do your reframe, change the meaning, process to feel a different emotion. If you don't want to be angry, if you don't want to have an angry, blow up response, and you want to handle with peace and calm, well, what's the reframe? What's the new song you have to run? That's the key to emotional mastery and directing and controlling emotions as you please here.